Thank you for tuning in to the Postmodern Realities podcast, brought to you by the Christian Research Institute and the Christian Research Journal. I'm Melanie Cogdill, managing editor of the Christian Research Journal. It's May 2023, and you're listening to episode 339, which is a conversation about the April 2023 event, SatanCon. On this episode, I'm joined by Dr. John Ferrer, who is a content creator for Cross-Examine Ministries. He is also a teaching fellow with Equal Rights Institute. John has an MDiv in apologetics and a THM and a PhD in ethics and philosophy of religion. He is married to Christian apologist Hilary Ferrer of Mama Bear Apologetics. John has been our go-to author on Satanism, and in the past several years, he has done a review of the documentary Hail Satan. He has also done a review of the reboot TV series Sabrina the Teenage Witch. He has also covered for us the occult in his article, Infiltrated, Recognizing and Responding to Occultism in Your Church. And recently, he covered the performance at the Grammys with Sam Smith and Kim Petras with a satanic theme. Now, you can find all of these articles and our podcasts related to them on our website, equip.org. Well, as I mentioned, today's podcast episode is just kind of a news update, and I'll let you know in the show notes. Check those to find the articles that John has written for us before on Satanism and Satan-related topics. And years ago, we covered the documentary Hail Satan, and so I wanted to talk again about the Satanic Temple because last month they had their 10th year anniversary of SatanCon. I don't know if our listeners know that SatanCon is an event, and it was a sold-out event. And so can you tell us a little bit about this particular event? I guess it made the news. I don't know. Maybe it's because it was 10 years?
Yeah, it was newsworthy. It was a fairly large gathering in Boston, Massachusetts. It was their annual gathering, and this one happened to be their 10th year anniversary. One of the more newsworthy elements of it was that it was more than twice as big as last year's. This one was in Boston, Massachusetts. Last year's was in Scottsdale, Arizona, and often they'll change the location according to whichever politician or newsworthy figurehead they're dedicating their convention to. Because usually they try to work in trolling aspects in most every element. So this one was dedicated to a legislator in Boston, Massachusetts that they had some grievance with. Last year was dedicated to some legislator in Scottsdale, Arizona that they had some grievance with. The experience of it, like I didn't go, I don't anticipate ever going, but from what I can tell from the pictures and the reports, it's kind of a libertine culture, but it's more like demon LARPing, if you know what LARPing is. It's an attempt to look demonic, although these folks generally don't believe in demons, but to look very dark and dastardly and rile up all the fears and anxieties of conservatives and Christians. But largely, it's kind of a LARPing event where they're trying to reinforce and sort of generate some sort of community and sense of resolve and support as an establishment. They're trying to kind of dig their roots in and prove that the Satanic Temple is an established religious presence. And this event helps reinforce that idea.
It's interesting because you said like last year they had a different focus, and back when we covered the documentary Hail Satan, which John wrote for us on that, they were really kind of focused on religious liberty. Now, when I looked at what was happening at SatanCon, it was kind of trying to be very relevant. They had seminars on a lot of sexuality issues, including the trans issue, pro-choice types of seminars, and then also, the racial issues. So do they try to pivot to what is kind of hot, bed things that maybe religious people would be against?
Well, I don't see it so much as a pivot, but as a shifting emphasis within a set of values that they hold to. The Satanic Temple is going to identify largely with political positions on the left side of the spectrum, progressive, not necessarily classic, but politically liberal. And so that's going to be LGBT, it's going to be pro-choice, going to be separation of church and state. I say that in distinction from religious freedom, because yes, they want to exercise their religious freedom, but that's almost more of a leverage that they use to keep Christians from exercising their religious freedoms in ways that the Satanic Temple might interpret as Christians being theocratic, trying to insert their religion into the state. And they try to use Satanism to sort of defeat that logic, that politic by analogy. So anytime Christians have some sort of invocation at a governmental meeting, the Satanic Temple is liable to say, "Hey, we should be able to pray to Satan as the invocation in your governmental meeting." And so they do that. I say trolling, but it's not quite so adolescent as just trolling might seem. This is more sophisticated. It's got more of a legal bent, that they're trying to flex their religious liberties in ways that force Christians and establishment conventional religion to kind of take a step back and have a bigger divide between church and state. So that's how they involve themselves in religious freedom. But they're also liable to protest pro-life laws in different countries, because ever since the Dobbs decision, there's been a back and forth about different pro-life and pro-choice laws, and they'll try to protest that. They see abortion as a religious right. But also a lot of the left-leaning subjects, LGBT, trans activism, those are going to be aspects that they'll try to emphasize too. And yes, that changes, so you might say, with the weather, and their emphasis might change with the weather, but they're operating from generally the same set of values the whole time.
Well, speaking of that, so I want to know a little bit more for our listeners, just what specifically the Satanic Temple believes. You said they're kind of grounded in some political ideology. And also, one of the people that was featured in that documentary, as well as was featured at the convention, was Lucien Graves. And who is he?
So Malcolm Jerry and Lucian Greaves are the co-founders of the Satanic Temple, but Lucian Greaves is also their most prominent spokesperson. When they established the Satanic Temple, that was in distinction from a couple other kinds of Satanism that were kind of on the margins. And they established it in 2012. It didn't really get active till the next year. And then by 2019, it had achieved kind of official tax-exempt religious status. So the government recognizes them as a protected religious class. If I had to sum it up in one statement, I would say if oppositional defiance disorder was a religion, it would be the Satanic Temple. Their posturing, their outlook is intentionally oppositional to what they see as oppressive, conformist, and otherwise problematic influences in mainline religion and establishment religion. Now, their mission statement clarifies things a little further, and this is starting to lean more towards what I would call left-wing value set. But there's a lot we could actually look at this and I dare say agree with. But you have to understand, of course, they're going to infuse this mission statement with meaning and significance that's very different from how a Christian might interpret it. But their mission statement is, the mission of the Satanic Temple is to encourage benevolence and empathy, reject tyrannical authority, advocate practical common sense, oppose injustice, and undertake noble pursuits. That's actually not an objectionable mission statement, which is really fascinating because the Satanic Temple sort of defined itself into existence a little over 10 years ago and basically used this set of values that pretty much everybody can agree with. That's not to say that other brands of Satanism would reject all of these, but this is very marketing savvy. It's very shrewd, so that at least everybody on the left side of the political spectrum would see the benevolence and empathy and might read into that with sort of a left-wing understanding of how that works with the state. Folks on the right are generally going to hear the Satanic Temple part and stop listening after that. But folks on the left might say, okay, let's hear what they got to say. And then they unpack it in 7 tenets. Now, between the mission statement and the 7 tenets, this is supposed to be sort of the skeleton structure of what constitutes the Satanic Temple. I won't go through all of them, but I'll try to summarize them here. So one is you should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all. Two is struggle for justice. That's ongoing and necessary. Number three, your body or one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. So it's a radical bodily autonomy. This is part of their pro-choice stance as well. And then the freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. So they would respect free speech and use it in their favor. I don't know how far they go with that. I suspect that they would sort of lean against things like hate speech, but I don't know. That's kind of a toss-up. I'd have to talk with them about that, see how they interpret that. And then beliefs, number five, beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. The scientific element ties the Satanic Temple a little bit back into LaVeyan Satanism or the Church of Satan, where they tried to talk about how they're just talking about science. What people interpret as black magic and LaVeyan Satanism, that's just science that hasn't been validated yet. They see magic and science as part of the same continuum. The Satanic Temple doesn't affirm magic. Black magic, white magic, any magic, they don't uniformly affirm that. Now, they allow it, but they don't affirm it. And so when they say scientific, they're probably talking about science. Number six, people are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it. Number seven, every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. So there's still a sense of trying to be non-dogmatic, even though they've got these tenets and a mission statement, which are the hallmarks of a dogma, of a doctrinaire stance. Nevertheless, they try to frame it as we've got these moral, emotional, social values that frame everything else. So any dogma people try to assert is subjugated underneath these value statements we have. So that's in a nutshell the Satanic Temple. And they're the ones who conducted this meeting in Boston, Massachusetts.
I want to give you a preview about what's coming up on the Postmodern Realities podcast. If you're a new listener, you might not realize we've been podcasting for 7 years and interviewing our authors about a variety of topics that are very relevant to every Christian, including many of our cultural apologetics topics. So with heading towards 350 episodes, there is so much to discover. Even if you found us 2 years ago, that's 5 years of content you might not have heard in our weekly podcast. So what's coming up in May? Well, The Last of Us, which is a series on HBO. It is also based on a video game. And in fact, it has been very popular. The rating on Rotten Tomatoes for both the video game and the TV series is at 96%. Not only that, season 1 of Last of Us had a viewership of 30.4 million people, which was the largest since their final season of Game of Thrones. Not something we did or would cover, but The Last of Us is very interesting. And I thought it was all about zombies. It really isn't. It's very fascinating. Now, even if it's something that you won't watch, it is something that you should know about. So you want to tune in for that. I will say, though, that The Last of Us, at least the television series, is rated R for extreme graphic violence and language. So that's what's coming up. But I would also like to remind you to help us with the algorithm. We really need your help. We need more people to find out about this podcast, and we want people to know about all of the content that we have that can equip Christians. So please share all of your favorite content on your social media accounts, or just simply tell a friend. That's a good way to get the word of mouth going for the Postmodern Realities podcast. So we're really grateful for your help. And if you would like to give us a tip to continue to bring you this content, we would really appreciate it. Very easy. Go to equip.org, hit journal, hit Postmodern Realities podcast. Any landing page has a link to where you can give us a tip. So maybe you would be willing to skip a couple of lattes or your favorite coffee drink or your favorite lunch out and give us a tip for $5, $10, or $20. Every amount helps. And we're really thankful. So we hope you continue enjoying our content. Now back to our conversation about SatanCon. Well, that makes me want to ask you about Satanism generally, because it sounds like you mentioned that there are other kinds of Satanism. I think when most people, I mean, whether they're religious or not, when they think of Satanism, they think, oh, these people, conduct kind of magical ceremonies, or they talk to the dead, or they worship Satan. So what is Satanism generally? And do most Satanists even believe in any kind of spiritual realities or God or heaven and hell? I mean, one of the seminars you could go to at the, convention was a history of 5,000 years of demonology. Maybe it's just, oh, what has people have been said about demonology, not like we believe in demons, or maybe some of them do believe in demons.
Well, Satanism generally is going to cover a broad spectrum. Let me back up and say there's a couple different leading kinds of Satanism, and then there's more that are intentionally off the radar because people stand to take a lot of flack when they come out and declare themselves Satanists. So they aren't necessarily publicizing this. And then there's secretive conspiratorial types that are trying to stay very mysterious, very occult, very esoteric. And that's on purpose with some groups. But I'll mention three of the more recognized ones with a written record behind them. The Satanic Temple we just mentioned, they're atheists. They are politically progressive activists. They don't affirm any magic formally. Informally, their members can do what they want because they're very libertine. And they're egalitarian, so men and women are equal roles, equal status, and they're very theatrical. So even though they don't necessarily affirm magic, they'll kind of use a lot of theatrics and try to play to the camera a lot to make a statement, to create a public uproar even. And so they'll use a lot of theatrics for that. The Church of Satan, that is LaVeyan Satanism, this didn't begin in 2012. This began in 1969. This is a more classic version, but it's also atheist. And it's a little different from the Satanic Temple in that it's more cynical. Instead of being progressive, it's more just libertine. Instead of identifying with progressive parties, egalitarianism, they would tend to be more anarchist, libertine, probably still left-leaning if they had to pick a party to vote for, but they see human beings as radically unequal, even saying that folks have every right to try to be as superior as possible, claim as much power for themselves as they can or want, and understand that if they go past what they can handle, well, they'll have to reap the consequences, and that's just life. So it's kind of an evolutionary nature, and life and society are all red in tooth and claw. That's kind of the cynical perspective of the Church of Satan. There's an emphasis on self-empowerment and strength. There's also an emphasis on dark magic. So they don't really see a strong distinction between white magic and dark magic. It's all just magic. Some selfish, some is selfless. It's all just magic. The Church of Satan would also be more ceremonial. And because they affirm magic, the ceremonies, they might ascribe more real power to it instead of just symbolism. So whereas the Church of Satan is ceremonial, the Satanic Temple, TST, is more theatrical. Ceremonial, theatrical. Now, there's a third category that's sort of an offshoot of the Church of Satan, which is the Temple of Set. They affirm spiritual realities, likely some sort of heaven or hell, God, and Satan. They are more theistic, whereas the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple, those are classically atheist. But of course, because they're fairly libertine, both of them, they'll let members in who identify all sorts of other things. But this Temple of Set, formed in 1975 as an offshoot of the Church of Satan by Michael Aquino, was the founder of it. Very cynical, very libertine, very self-empowerment based, strength based, affirms dark magic, very ceremonial. Because they're more explicitly supernaturalists in their understanding, they have a core doctrinal divide with the Church of Satan. Now, they keep a lot of their material secret, and I haven't done enough digging to try to do a big expose on them, but I do know that they don't like being called Satanists. They consider that to have too much negative connotation. Post-Satanists, maybe, or Setians after Set. Set is the god of war, the god of chaos, and that's sort of the central figure. And there's likely to be some sort of a counter interpretation of how, that's the mainline religions interpret him as the god of chaos. He's really just the god of power, something like that. But that's the Temple of Set, Church of Satan, and Satanic Temple. Now, if I have to say what's Satanism generally, I would say key takeaways are hedonism, seeking pleasure, seeking power. This is what they all have in common with atheists who, as a ethical position, tend to be hedonists of some shade or color. So they're hedonists. Also, you could say that their mantra is "My will be done," or the half of the witches read, "Do what thou wilt. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of thy law." That's probably the closest thing to a central law that you can find in Satanism. Culturally, Satanists tend to be new atheists. At least the Church of Satan and Satanic Temple tend to be new atheists, tend to be very anti-authoritarian, tend to be very adversarial, seeing themselves sort of like the underdog who have sort of the poorly understood outsider, misrepresented, but still there's something about them that they root for, they want you to root for, and they still see their cause as just. Often conspiracists, not in the sense of being hyper skeptical, irrational, but more like they see everybody else as deluded conformists. They see us, Christians, as just being blind to what's really going on. Socially, so that's sort of ethically where they stand, culturally where they tend to be. But socially, I think your typical atheist, if I had to do like a very oversimplified profile, your typical atheist is going to be a little socially awkward. There's going to be a high ratio of nerds, gamers, band geeks, anime fans. And I don't say that in any condescending way. I'm a card carrying nerd myself. But you're going to see that social awkwardness, kind of the intellectual, often college educated, so many times even on the spectrum. And then they're going to be typically left leaning politically. Culturally, they will look a lot like what goth was, just looks wise, maybe 20, 30 years ago. But this has a new theological element, a new worldview element. And it was super empowered, I think, by the new atheist movement as well. So Satanism generally is going to say, my will be done. It's going to be adversarial and so on.
And do they believe in any kind of spiritual realities or Satan himself or demons?
Generally, no. Generally, now the Temple of Set, yes, but from what I can tell, they are a vanishing minority of modern day Satanists. The Church of Satan, the Satanic Temple, they don't have any formal affirmation of demons or gods. Now the church, but here's the thing: because they try to emphasize, or at least the Satanic Temple try to emphasize values over dogma, they're not really restricting theistic atheists out of from attending either. They're still happy to have the numbers as long as folks, play nice. So they generally don't affirm the spiritual realities and this very populated supernatural perspective that Christians would, or that many occultists would. So their brand of occult is going to be trying to more like manipulate world powers or use politics and theatrics to get their way.
Well, the last question I wanted to ask you on this pod blast is, how should Christians respond to or engage with people who are members of the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple? Now, I know some of our listeners are thinking, there's no way I would even run into somebody like this. But you know what? You never know, because actually, speaking of gamers and nerds, I was in a Discord channel for gamers, and it was in kind of a thread about parenting, and somebody started saying some stuff. Anyway, it turns out that one of the people in the conversation, I started having a conversation with this guy who's a dad, is a member of the Satanic Temple. And we had a very civil conversation, and I was able to push into some things and also affirm other things where he felt like how he had been treated by Christians and things like that. So it was fascinating. I think the one thing that he appreciated was I actually knew what the Satanic Temple was about. And the reason why he joined it, I don't know that he would go to SatanCon or consider himself a hardcore atheist. As I kind of talked to him more about his beliefs, I don't think that he was in, that kind of camp of the group, but he wanted to join an organization that was doing some good in the community. And in his community, they're doing a lot with helping the homeless and things like that. And he said that empathy was really big to him, So those kinds of things. And so actually I had opportunity to engage with someone who is a literal member of the Satanic Temple. So how should Christians, thoughtfully engage them, especially because you said the majority are just new atheists?
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to have that encounter and that you were able to handle it well. It sounds like you were able to walk out some of the advice I'm going to be giving right here. I would say no flinch rule. Follow the no flinch rule. So when someone says something off the wall, instead of jumping into alarmism mode, just don't flinch. Weather the initial storm that where you want to react aggressively somehow and go on the defensive, and instead, count to 10 and just get yourself composed, and then ask a calm, understanding type of question from there, and then let the conversation unroll like that. I think it's largely going to be relational evangelism, emphasis on the relational part. If it's like a ratio, how much of it's explicit evangelism and how much of it's relationship building, we're probably talking like high 90s relationship. Low percentage of it is going to be explicit evangelism, because as a general rule, people don't drift from new atheism to the Satanic Temple just because of doubts they had about the church. From what I can tell, that's not enough to drive people to take on the persona that comes with the Satanic Temple, because you have to be willing to embrace being misunderstood, knowing that they're going to misunderstand you, and kind of revel in that, almost enjoying being misunderstood, enjoying the power of looking mysterious and dark and dastardly, and then shocking them when you're not as dastardly as they thought. There's a fascination you have to have with that capacity, that kind of power you can have over people that would drive people to Satanism. So I think you don't go just from new atheism to Satanism. You have to have new atheism plus something that makes you bitter. Maybe a personal wound, maybe people just chronically misunderstood you anyway, so you might as well use it to your advantage. Maybe you're hurt by the church, maybe your parents were anti-intellectual. A lot of your new atheists and a lot of your Satanic Temple folks are college educated, smart cookies, they're intelligent, they're thoughtful, and they ask good, challenging questions to the establishment. So when you find out someone you're talking to is Satanist, no flinch rule, relational evangelism, seek to understand, respect their intelligence, be civil, kind, friendly, try to earn trust and affirm the good that you can see in them. There's going to be no Christian out there that has everything so right that you agree with everything about them or that they're doing. And there's going to be no atheist so wrong that you can't find some good in them that you can affirm. And if you can't see any good in them, then you're probably not looking hard enough. Understand that they're gravitating to a source of meaning for order and coherence to their lives. And we do the same thing. This is a human effort. We gravitate towards community. We try to create kinship groups to lend social support, have some meaning and sense of depth and significance in life. And that's what they're doing too. I think as a general rule, you can assume they're wounded. They have some kind of hurt that turned into bitterness over time. But I wouldn't overemphasize that. And even if it's just a working assumption, allow yourself to be proven wrong there, because they might not have a particular wound that they could knowingly point to. I would add, just from personal experience, I was in a grocery store recently, last week, and I saw in the checkout line, a man had the pentagram, which when the pentagram, that's a 5-pointed star. And when it has that pointy goat head on it with the beard of the goat pointing down, that's called a Baphomet. He had one of those tattoos on his arm, and I knew that's a flag, that's a signal. So when I went through the checkout line and got to him, I said, "That's an interesting tattoo. What does it mean to you?" And he said, "It's a Baphomet." And I asked him point blank, "Oh, are you a Satanist?" Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend just anybody asking strangers, "Are you a Satanist?" But I got the cues. Socially, he kind of fit the profile, and it was a guess, but it was an educated guess. And he said, yes, he's part of the Church of Satan. And I knew Church of Satan wasn't the Satanic Temple. And I said, "Oh, Levian Satanism, not Satanic Temple." And his eyes lit up. Someone knew the difference, because in their view, that's huge. Like from the outside, conservatives might look at Marxists and say, oh, you're just another commie. And that person might say, I am a socialist, dang it, I'm not a communist. And they might fight over it because in their view, that's a huge difference. That's worth killing over. And millions of lives have been lost over the fight between socialism and communism. But from a capitalist perspective, it's all Marxism. So we might be tempted to lump it all together, but when you can dignify that distinction from their perspective, you might earn some credibility. So I said, oh, so you're not part of the Satanic Temple. And then he had maybe 10, 15 seconds of explaining how he didn't identify with them. He thought they were soft. He thought they were kind of, I threw out this word to help him kind of sum it up because I was already walking out the line and I only had like 5-10 more seconds. I said, yeah, they seem like trolls to a lot of people. And he's like, yeah, that's it. But he considers himself a member of Church of Satan. That's LaVeyan Satanism, which is going to be more cynical, more libertine, more empowerment focused. They're not progressive political activists, and they affirm dark magic. And at that point, as I was leaving, I said, I'm a Christian myself, but I think people should be understood. And I left it at that. I didn't have a big opportunity to go into a full gospel spiel, and I hadn't really earned the trust to where he was willing to hear it from me. But I was able to leave a positive pebble in his shoe to where he doesn't have just as negative an impression of Christians as he might have had before. Because there was someone who was willing to recognize the difference between denominations of Satanism and said he's worth understanding. And I think that's the kind of relational evangelism that makes a positive impression and helps us as Christians to interact meaningfully and positively in a very pluralistic world.
I think that's a good word from John, just as, yourself being an apologist professionally, but also for the Christian lay apologist that's out there, is that a lot of times we're put in positions where we can just, plant the proverbial seed in terms of just recognizing both your interaction and my interaction. It was recognizing and telling them, I understand what you believe. And they were surprised the Christian even did. And so I think that's a good word. Well, thanks, John, for being a guest again on the Postmodern Realities podcast. And as always, I have a fun question for John. It's summer's coming up, John. What is the most memorable vacation you ever had?
The most memorable vacation I ever had. Wow, I didn't see this one coming. I don't know if I could call it a vacation, but it was a trip. I did get a chance to go to Israel, and that was a fantastic, exhausting, amazing trip. Very formative. But probably the most fun would be the occasional, like the yearly trips to Jamaica I would do when I would help chaperone the senior mission trip to Jamaica at Pantego Christian Academy. That was pretty meaningful for me. I miss those blue waters and the rum cakes and anytime I hear Bob Marley, it just takes me back. So, yeah.
Well, thanks, John, for being a guest on the Postmodern Realities podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to episode 339 of the Postmodern Realities podcast from the Christian Research Journal. Today's guest was Dr. John Ferrer, and we have been discussing the April 2023 SatanCon. And you can go to equip.org and read all of John's content that he has done for us that was mentioned in the introduction and that has to do with Satanism, including his most recent piece evaluating the Sam Smith and trans singer Kim Petras and their satanic-themed performance at the 2023 Grammy Awards. Stay connected with the Christian Research Institute and all the new content we have coming your way. The best way to do that is to head on over to our website, equip.org. There you will find thousands of free resources right at your fingertips, from articles to video to audio, and it's all for free. You'll find our podcasts hosted there, as well as the Bible Answer Man broadcast, which is hosted by CRI President Hank Hanegraaff and streams live every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. In addition, you don't want to miss out on subscribing to Hank Unplugged, which is the podcast of Hank Hanegraaff. And in that podcast, he has really in-depth, free-flowing, essential Christian conversations with some of the most interesting, informative, and inspirational people. And in addition, he has a new series on his podcast feed called Hank Unplugged Shorts, which Hank goes into the headlines in the mainstream media and refutes a lot of those cultural issues that we have in these short podcast episodes. And there's quite a few of them. You don't want to miss out on them. Now, if you want to find some of this at other places where it's all in one place, really subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a great way to get all of our content there, our podcasts there, and different individual questions theologically that people have that Hank answers at our YouTube channel. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, I don't know how to subscribe to YouTube. I don't have a YouTube account. Well, actually, you might just have a YouTube account. If you have a Gmail address, you have a YouTube account. Just log into YouTube with your Gmail address and search for Bible Answer Man channel, and please become one of our subscribers. In addition, if you see that bell icon right there on our front page, please click that, and every time that we have new content, you will receive a notification that new content is up on our channel for you to be able to consume. So thank you so much for the ways in which you partner with the Christian Research Institute. We are grateful for you listening and reading and watching.